because we need to remember, Uri Brigade headquarters was the headquarters that was attacked by those suicide bombers. We lost so many soldiers. In fact, Kapil took us on that whole pathway because from the Uri Brigade headquarters, the nearest Pakistani side of the border, nearest is about 4 kilometers. So there's a hill, and beyond the hill, there's Pakistan. Because Uri is like a dagger. It goes inside Pakistani territory. It's surrounded by Pakistan on all three sides. So it's amazing how they think.
Always
Disciplined.
Also, I think the message you also want to give is कि ये chill. हम सतर्क हैं लेकिन हम डरे हुए नहीं.
Oh, nice.
So there was one thing like the officer we met, he talked about chill, like हमारा chill होता है like यहाँ पे. So we went to the mess there for dinner, and our messes are very formal, like so I always ask Sudeep, dress code क्या होगा? You have to.
Yeah.
That's one thing I do. I always ask specifically, is like, what's the dress code? Because Purav and I want access to the mess, because that's a very important part of the entire.
And they do the messes well, right? So जैसे यहाँ पे उसके mess के बाहर एक lounge area, they had the entire history of the brigade put up there. So then he walked us through some of the history, what were the key events, key achievements of the brigade. But सारा formal होता है.
And in regimental messes, the mess havaldar who runs the mess, one of his jobs is to ensure that no glass is empty. So you can get easily drunk, okay? Because and you have to pace yourself because आपका glass empty हुआ, there's no gap. And refill ऐसा नहीं.
पता होता है, सब रटा होता है. Everybody is having a different drink. You would know किसको कितना ice चाहिए, कितना पानी चाहिए, क्या चाहिए.
Wow.
But so here, after that we had dinner, and then we asked, will any of the other officers be joining us? तो उन्होंने बोला कि नहीं यार, हमने ना chilled out कर दिया. कभी-कभी क्या होता है कि शाम को everybody has light food, so they don't even need to wear formal clothes. They can come in and they can eat at the bar. Of course, they can't sit on the table. We are not barbarians. Okay.
Wow.
So, and then he said कि यार रात को ना light खाते हैं, because what happens is रात को border पे काफी activity चलती है. We have all these border patrols at night. We have this emergency rescue teams, ERTs चलती है. तो रात को थोड़ा लेट हो जाता है. Drills कब तक 2:30-3 बजे तक drills चल सकती है. So these days are busy, but हमने morning में light कर दिया है इनके लिए. They can come in at 6.
Oh. 6 is like midnight to me. Oh my God. So I have no idea why, but stories of military folks have always been so fascinating for me. You know, mix of bravery, gallantry, discipline, and all things perfect. I actually remember a trip when I was driving in Kashmir on a vacation, and I saw a whole bunch of tourists, get off their cars ek karke to either take a selfie with the army folks there, or just getting off and shaking the hands of the army folks as a matter of thanking them for all the selfless work there too. We're all so proud of our military folks. And so you can imagine how happy I got when I met these two authors who we have on our podcast today. Sudeep Krishna and Purav Gandhi have written a book on the Indian military folks and how they lead by example. Their book is called Lead from the Front, Inspiring Military Stories of Courage, Leadership and Resilience. So Sudeep and Purav, through their entire research for their book, had the honor of traveling and visiting so many of these locations that we have seen on TV or read about, like staying at Uri and meeting and listening to stories of the army folks there, or visiting the Air Force base at Gwalior and meeting the Indian Tom Cruises from Top Gun, or staying at the NDA campus in Pune and observing life of these trainee cadets there and all. Of course, they've also met many more retired and senior folks from the Army, Navy, Air Force, and listened to all their experiences and stories and all of it. So this will be a slightly different sounding episode because the locations that Sudeep and Purav would be talking about aren't really touristy ones. But in our opinion, these are places that most of us should know about and should try and visit whenever we get a chance. Oh, and I forgot. Hi, I'm Revati here, the host of the podcast, Misadventures of a Sneaker. Well, I think I've spoken a lot already. So let's take a quick little break and then jump into the episode. Hey, do you know we write a travel-themed newsletter every week? Yep. And in each newsletter, we write about different destinations and travel experiences from around the world. In fact, You will get lots of deets about this particular episode too in our newsletter. Head over to misadventuresofasneaker.substack.com. That's misadventuresofasneaker.substack.com. You will find the link in our bio as well. And by the way, if you enjoy listening to our podcast, you can also support our team by buying us a coffee. Head over to our show notes and click on support to contribute any amount that you'd like. It will be a huge morale booster for us. So now, without delaying further, let's jump in. Hey Purav, hey Sudeep. Welcome to our podcast, Misadventures of a Sneaker. I'm really excited to have you guys in my podcast today.
Thank you, Revati. Very excited to be here, talk to you about our travel adventures and our book.
Yes. So I read your book, Lead from the Front. It's a really fascinating one. You know, stories about the armed forces are like a mix of being intriguing and so inspiring. We all know a little about them, you know, through all the movies that we watch, Bollywood, vagara, TV reporting like Barkha Dutt from Kargil and all of that. But we honestly don't know enough at all. I also follow many of them on Twitter to read about, you know, their experiences and stories and the way they write. Extremely fascinating. And your book had lots of such first-hand experiences from the colonels and the captains and the commanders. इनके ना titles ही कितने मस्त होते हैं. And listening to you know और their कहानी तो मुझे तो बहुत बड़ा मजा आया.
They'll appreciate the fact that you find the titles fancy.
अरे बहुत अच्छा लगता है. It's like and that too earlier captain now something else. पढ़ के बहुत मजा आता है. It gives you a gravitas kinds like ऐसे feeling. So tell me something. So firstly, we are going to be talking about places that probably many of us, definitely haven't visited. Most of us haven't visited. Many of us might not get an opportunity to visit and see it from up close and personal, like how you guys did it. So I'm going to start with asking you guys a question. How did you think of firstly just writing a book? Because both of you all are full-time corporate professionals. Everyone has so much of work. And this book, nothing about the book is actually connected with your line of work, except the fact that you guys are leaders and you guys are talking about leaders. So how did the idea of just writing a book come around?
I never thought of writing a book. Okay. There was, I would say with me, there was a lot of, call it healthy or unhealthy obsession with the armed forces because I grew up in Jammu. And, you know, being a border town, there was a lot of presence, armed forces presence, right? Air Force and Army presence, especially in Jammu. And we are Telugus. So it so happened that a lot of people who were Telugus were serving in the army. So that's where the community, when it got built up, I got a lot of exposure to the armed forces, the army cantonments, the Air Force bases and stuff like that. And hung out with a lot of these guys. And then also, one thing that people in the South probably don't appreciate as much is that in the North, and especially in the border towns of Punjab, Himachal, Jammu and Kashmir, there's a lot of respect for the armed forces and especially the army. And there are many towns and villages where, serving in the army is considered to be, a matter of pride. There are many villages where, at least one family member is serving in the army, right? In a particular regiment or some part of the armed forces. So there's an environment there which is very accepting and appreciative of what the armed forces get done and do. And on top of that, the community within which I grew up in Jammu had a lot of people from the armed forces. So there was a bit of that obsession. I wanted to go join the army. I wrote the NDA. I cleared the written exam. Then you go for something called the Services Selection Board, which is a 5-day, process where they do a psychological evaluation. They do technical tests. They're basically trying to find officer-like qualities, which my group task officer told me I didn't have, right? He in fact said कि बेटा तुम MBA कर लो आज मैं तुम्हारा कुछ नहीं होगा. So and I was very convinced because I could see myself floundering through those 5 days and I realized कि boss, बाहर से देखना एक चीज होती है, going and because you see NDA is the premier institution for defense for identifying defense officers, right? And it's the equivalent of the IITs and the IIMs for the armed forces.
Absolutely.
And the very best of the best get in. And once you get in, you sort of are committed for at least 20 years, if not more. And if you do well, then you get positioned for some very senior, positions in the armed forces. So obviously they want the best of the best, and they're very careful who they bring on board. And they didn't think I was the right person. So, and then of course I pursued a corporate career, but somewhere in my mind, a bit of that was left, right? So I married an army brat. My father-in-law was a colonel in the armed forces. Then through that, I got reconnected to the armed forces. So whenever I used to meet my colleagues, I used to, share a lot of stories. कि पता है यहाँ ये हुआ, पता है वहाँ वो हुआ, वो कश्मीर में ऐसे हुआ, वैसे हुआ.
मजेदार.
And all that, right? And then along comes this guy who then says, boss, the stories are amazing. Let's write a book. So my life was perfect. There was nothing wrong. I was, doing my job. I had these 5-6 stories. I would, recycle them again and again. And, in all these corporate events, parties, people used to, bear with me and listen to these stories. He's the only guy who actually took something very different from those stories. And he said we should write a book. After that, I hand over to him because uske baad, whatever is there today is because of him. If you don't like the book, it's him.
Okay, before that, I'll say that I really enjoyed the book. बहुत मजा आया. I, in fact, have read it 1.5 times. So I started reading the book thinking this would be a research that I'm doing before I do this podcast with you guys. And so when one does research, I usually kind of underline or highlight and things like that. But I just kept reading it because stories pay stories. And I mean, in a book, I really enjoy personal stories than, it being, I like fiction and all that as well. But personal stories always connect. And that's how this podcast is also about a lot of personal stories that people have. And you guys did a lot of that. So I had to read it once again, where I had to do the research where I had to underline, remember the names of the colonels and the commodores and all of them. So I really did enjoy the book.
All credit to Sudeep's passion of so many years. So it is like I come from a Gujarati background, born and brought up in Gujarat. Yeah. Until I met Sudeep, I didn't know what NDA was. Born in a setup where everyone talks about business. That's the beginning and end of everything. तो ना तो मैंने IIT लिखा ना मुझे NDA का entrance exam पता था. I had no idea. But when Sudeep told these stories, suggested कि like you're telling about all these things, तो कभी हमें ले भी चलो एक बार. Like you talk about all these stories कि मैं NDA गया था, वहाँ ये हुआ, वहाँ वो हुआ, so take us along. So then Sudeep's co-brother, who used to head the NDA, had already retired, but unke connection ke through with him, we went to the NDA. And this was for me like one of my first exposure to the armed forces in general, and just fascinated by the entire NDA campus, the aura, the people, everything was just amazing. I was mesmerized completely. And as Sudeep was talking about these stories, one of the topics we also talked about very deeply was about leadership in armed forces. So तब से हम बात कर रहे थे. In army, there are great leaders that get trained at NDA. The entire training concept is very different as compared to everything. And then being an entrepreneur, right? Like you always try to think about different business ideas. कि ये भी कर सकते हैं, इसकी दुकान खोल सकते हैं, restaurant, coffee shop, training business. So he said like
the Gujju bhai is talking, huh?
No, Sudeep also does that. ऐसा कुछ नहीं है. So he takes out the calculator immediately. Okay, if we train 20 students into this many rupees, like immediately that starts.
For our listeners, Sudeep ने अपना आंख बंद कर दिया है शर्म के मारे.
No, it's like I always have the most often used app on my phone is a calculator. Okay.
Oh God, I can't even say wow to that. Excel function तो बोल देते Sudeep. Sorry, Purav, I interrupted you. I had to put a ganda statement in between.
Now, with all that we are saying, like, how do we take this kind of training concept from the army to corporate world? क्योंकि यहाँ तो सब कुछ ऐसे by chance है. So then बचपन से मेरा one of my passion, like when everyone asks you why did you start this company, ऐसा I did not have like a deep reason like others have कि मेरे पिताजी को डायबिटीज था तो फिर वो सॉल्व करने के लिए मैंने डायबिटीज की कंपनी खोल दी. Like ever since I was growing up, I wanted to start a business. Very similarly, I always wanted to write a book. And then I saw that at least instead of everything that we do around our work, there was nothing so substantial to write a book. Here was a topic which was substantial, something we could be passionate about, we could get behind, and write a book. So that's where we thought, I told Sudeep ki yaar, we should write a book. It was a long journey actually. Like we wrote this book 3 times before we released. So the first time it was a book on leadership, meaning like a management framework on how to be a good leader. Then I think we ourselves got bored from that framework. So then we scrapped.
पढ़ा है वो पिलर्स 4 पिलर्स थे, उसके ऊपर एक घर था, नीचे एक बेस था.
I love consultants, man. I really do.
Consultants. So then we did that, and then we both looked at it and we said the only thing that is off about this book is that structure.
So then we scraped the idea. Then we figured like what would people really like to read? If we were reading, what would we like to read? And in that process, we had read like 15, 20 books also in the same genre. And we figured, yeah, the stories are what you really care about. And then each individual takes away his or her learnings from that story. It's different based on what is going on in their life, their context, their intellectual capacity, and so on. And there we pivoted to the idea of the stories. So then we started writing stories. But this was again early stage. So we had met 1 or 2 people, but everything else was basically like done based on like consulting secondary research. So some nets pe padh ke humne kiya tha. And they were still interesting stories because Sudeep knew this, but I didn't know. We found a lot of literature existing on these subjects actually. It was not in a easy to digest format for an average audience, but a lot has been written about these wars, these instances, and it has been very nicely depicted. So from there, we wrote these stories. And then I think that's where good karma kicked in, right? So then for one of the stories we had written, I was talking about the book concept with one of my friends, and he said that, you know, मेरे uncle army में थे, he had received a Veer Chakra, Bangladesh war में उन्होंने भी fight की थी, तुम्हारी story में भी Bangladesh war एक बार, you should maybe talk to him.
Wow.
But before you talk to him, एक उनका podcast सुन लेना. And then when we listened to the podcast, he had actually flew the same mission around which we had written the story.
Oh my God! This is that
the heli drop operation in Sylhet.
Yes. Oh, that was beautiful.
I was like listening to that podcast and like then I pinged Sudeep, and by then he had also listened to it, and he's like, yeah, he's the same guy. So then we met him, and then वहाँ से हमारा confidence खुला. Then we asked him, can you introduce us because we've written this one story on Daulat Beg Oldie. He's like, yeah, who do you want to meet? He's like, anybody who knows about it. He's like, okay, I'll introduce you to a guy who has written a story on this in Army magazine. Then he introduced, and we said that, hey, can we have a call with you to understand some more details of DP? He's like, okay, but why don't you talk to the pilot who flew the mission instead of talking to me?
Oh my God!
So then in that same email chain, he looped in the pilot and his boss. And then वहां से फिर हमारा confidence भी खुल गया, right? Then we started asking everybody, hey, this story we've written, can you introduce us to somebody who was part of this mission? And then fascinating, all these people were so nice. They introduced us to different individuals who were the right individuals. They welcomed us, talked to us about the story, gave us fantastic details, and hence the third iteration of the book where we rewrote almost everything.
Wow, zero ego, these guys, when they're referring you to, I mean, because all these guys who have flown the mission and all now, this was so many years back. So they must either be right at the top or they would have retired and retired from being at the top.
So you talked about designations, right? Like once, twice, in an email, I wrote like a wrong junior designation.
One of these officers, he retired as a air vice marshal, which is in that thing maybe the third highest rank in the Air Force.
Wow.
And Purav addressed him as Air Commodore, right, which is one rank lower.
When he flew the mission, he was Air Commodore. Okay, so that's
when he flew the mission, he was group captain.
Okay.
Something. So I researched and figured out what was there.
So I
And
looked at the
dude,
email and I freaked out. I called him in panic. I said, boss, ranks are sacrosanct.
Did he respond in any?
no, I wrote a second email and I said, like, sorry,
This is so the group captain Suryakant Shafekar.
Air
Are you
Vice
talking about him?
Air Vice Marshal.
Air Vice Marshal.
Air Vice Marshal Storachakra. So
I absolutely love that story. And I think it's honestly one of my favorites in your entire book. The story itself plus the manner in which you've written the whole thing, setting the whole thing up, वगैरह बहुत ही अच्छा था. What a story, what a man, yaar. Dealing with so much of self-doubt, then mustering up the confidence to take such a huge risk of flying the aircraft, to such a high altitude wala jagah, this Daulat Beg Goldie that you mentioned. Then the conversation that he has with the Jawan there, Jawan only, I think, who tells him how tough that terrain is, how tough life is for them there, how long it takes him to go to his village whenever they have those chuttis.
14 days to go from Daulat Beg Goldie by foot to Leh, which is where their homes were. These are ITBP, Indo-Tibet Border Police soldiers. 14 days. And by air, it took them half an hour.
Crazy. I mean, that story was beautiful. And then movies mein dekhte na 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 na. You could actually get that in the background of your head when you are seeing he's just landing and there's no tarmac. It's just like almost like gravel. And then he comes out, gives sweets, goes back. वो पूरा background में like the कंधों से मिलते हैं कंधे, that whole music वो पूरा मेरे background मन में चल रहा था when this whole scene. That story is very, very beautifully written, and it's a lovely story as well.
The beauty of the story, Revati, is that these two gentlemen, Shafekar sir and his super boss, who was the Western Air Commander, Air Marshal Barbora, they were sort of at the end of their careers, right? I mean, that was Air Marshal Barbora's, I think, second last posting. He would retire in about 2 years from there. And for Air Vice Marshal Shafekar, he was maybe 7-8 years away from retirement. So they didn't need to do it.
Yeah.
They could have flown away happily into the sunset. And we were talking to a colonel who actually had to evacuate one of his soldiers who got high altitude sickness, and he was actually evacuated using one of the aircraft.
Oh.
He was very emotional. He said, had that airstrip not been activated, I would have lost my guy, right? And he said, people like these are the people who change the course of countries, right? I mean, what they did then changed the course of what India would achieve maybe 10, 15 years later. Because remember, China, when they came and occupied our territory in 2020, we were able to build our forces very quickly using these airstrips that these two gentlemen had reactivated, right? And they had retired by then. So they retired about, 5-6 years before this incident happened. So sometimes when you're doing something because you think it's the right thing to do, not as much for you, but for the people under you and for the country, very few of us think that long term.
Very long term. Yeah, very long term. I mean, it in fact almost doesn't affect your career at all. It's just,
it's just mess it up because his whole thing was, had he landed, had that landing gone wrong, his career was over. Unforgiving is the word they use in the armed forces. If you ever mess up, your career is gone. I mean, they're brutal when it comes to evaluating people, much worse than us in the corporate world.
This is a plane worth thousands of crores. And there was very high likelihood that once they land, if they switch it off, the engine won't start. That was guaranteed. And it might not take off because you don't have enough runway to take off, and then to just have been lying there for years.
And then the oxygen issue and all that as well there, no?
So very low oxygen, right? So that's why
very low oxygen to start the engine. So they had to keep the engine on. And there was very limited runway to do the takeoff. So the plane might just have stayed there forever. So that was the risk they took, right? So there was life risk, of course, of crash landing, and all those things were there for sure. But even if they had managed successfully, had something gone wrong, their careers would have ended in a very miserable fashion.
Yeah.
And with all that, they just did it because they thought it was the right thing to do.
Really cool. Okay, so Bollywood, Farhan Akhtar, if you're listening, is pe movie banana chahiye tumko jaldi.
So today the government is working on road infrastructure. So there's a DSDBO road that connects to DBO. Remember, that was the time, 2008, when the only access point was that airstrip to DBO. But today, I think there's one road already. There's one more road that they're working on. So I mean, for your viewers, at some point in future, maybe some of you, if you're so inclined and adventurous, you could probably drive to DBO.
Oh, that would
Take
be
some
so
oxygen
nice.
cylinders with you.
Yeah, you said what? The 16,700 feet high is where the airstrip is.
It's the highest airstrip in the world, if I'm not mistaken. I don't think
in the world, yeah, not just India.
Adventurous बनना चाहिए यार, जाना चाहिए देखने के लिए. We go to see Chandratal Lake and we go to see this lake and that lake. No, we should go to see these things instead. It's nice to see.
You know, like nowadays, the Indian government and army have worked very hard on kind of making these places safe. So maybe Daulat Beg Oldie also in 5 to 10 years might be a very safe place where tourists can go. There might be a cafeteria there where we could have coffee and come back. They have done that on Pakistan border now. Hopefully, it will happen on China border as well in due course.
क्या बात है. Very nice.
Yeah. The other place is actually very easily accessible from Leh is the Siachen base camp. And what I remember is, I think Purav and I were, maybe I shouldn't say this on air, but we were planning to go visit. The only reason I don't want to say this on air is because our respective spouses wouldn't be very happy.
For the spouses, your dudes are dudes, yaar.
But yeah, you can fly into Leh, and I think you can drive to Nubra Valley, and it's about I think a 4 to 6 hour drive, if I'm not mistaken. And then from there you can go to the Siachen base camp. It's now open, and the government allows you. It was not accessible before, but now the government's opened. I think, and from there the Siachen Glacier is. So all the troops who go to the Siachen Glacier leave from the Siachen base camp.
Wow, and you're saying like from Leh airport to Nubra onwards is where.
Yeah, so I think Nubra Valley is where you might find decent accommodation. There are a few resorts there, and from there you can either hike or take a car, I think, to the Siachen place. From there, it's from what we calculated was maybe a 2-hour drive. For our second book, Purav, I think we should add that to our research.
I think so. Whether we write or not, we should definitely do the research.
And whether you write or not, can I join? We can do a live podcast from there.
It will be very cold.
Oh yeah, I know. My God, the videos of Siachen and all is just unbelievable. Like, how can someone forget about walking. हम लोग तो without any bags, nothing. We'll just be walking wearing 50 layers of clothes. These guys have like solid arms on them and supplies and everything. Alag level fitness has something else.
But look at the beauty of connectivity. Today you can leave from Bangalore or Hyderabad in the morning and reach this place before sunset.
Yeah.
From literally one end of the country to the extreme other end of the country. I mean, when we went to Uri for our first story in our book, which is sort of well-oiled machine story, which actually happened in Kupwara, but the officer who we were talking to, who's still serving, by the way, hence we've not used his actual name, he was based in Uri. And for every individual that we wrote a story about, we ensured that we met with them at least 2 or 3 times, because one was to hear their story. A second is to write the story. And, what they tell and the way we write could be very different. And then the third visit is to sit down with them and ensure that they're comfortable with the way we've written the story. Also, we want to be very sure that we have represented the fact well. Third is we are not used anything which is classified or confidential, which could lead to any, national security repercussions.
Absolutely.
Right. So, those things. So his officer was based in Uri, and both of us from Purav from Ahmedabad, I from Hyderabad, we left at like 6 in the morning from our respective locations. We landed in Srinagar by about 12:30 with a connecting flight, and we were in Uri by I think 3. Purav?
I think 2:33 we reached there. We had lunch. Sudeep's a big sucker for army food. Like, I also love it actually. All army locations is just amazing. Very nice.
Oh my God.
So we had lunch there. Amazing, like from 6 a.m. via Delhi, we reached there all the way to Uri base camp. From there, the officer was very kind. He arranged transport for us to go to the line of control. So there was one escort car, and then there was another car in which we were going. And then being polite, corporate citizens like, "Iski kya zarurat?" It's like, dude, like, iski zarurat hai.
We armed escorts also.
Oh,
Yeah,
with AKs.
yeah, proper AKs.
So this is the chapter with Captain or Colonel Kapil name change to one, right?
Yeah,
so
yeah.
you very casually mentioned so when there are AKs and I'm like AK kya hota hai? Because we always call it AK-47, right? It's not just an AK. So AK kya hota hai? I had to read a second time to understand it actually referring to AK-47, which these guys casually call us AKs. I'm like, oh. Amazing.
So AKs were okay. I think what freaked me out a bit was they were all wearing bulletproof jackets, the escorts.
Except
and then looked around, and the only people not wearing bulletproof jackets were Purav and I.
Wow, you guys are the adventurous and the brave. Jo, there's a stand-up comic who says, "Na, हमारे जवान border में लड़ रहे हैं." That you guys have got the border, not लड़ रहे हैं, but close to that. How was the road connectivity between Srinagar and Uri?
Amazing.
Amazing.
Very good. There is this road that goes from Srinagar all the way to Uri, and it goes parallel to the Jhelum River. Right? And when they say that if there's paradise on earth, it's there. The sky is a very different color of blue. It's all green everywhere, and then there's this flowing river next to you, and you go all the way to Uri. And the interesting thing is we stayed at the Uri Brigade headquarters. That's where we were hosted. We had full signal. The only person who didn't have signal is Purav, because he still carries a Vodafone.
These guys are getting 5G. So अब वो walkie-talkie use करते यार. All army guys use WhatsApp to communicate because वहाँ पे 5G signal है.
Seriously?
Proper 5G signal. The only place where we lost 5G signal was near the LOC, which probably was, I think, maybe 200-300 meters away from the LOC is where we lost the signal. But till there was full.
I lost signal in Baramulla. जहाँ पे 4-lane रोड खत्म हुआ वहां से my signal was done.
आपको सिर्फ गुजरात और मुंबई में ही सिग्नल मिलता है.
फर्स्ट वर्ल्ड कनेक्शंस होते हैं.
Very impressive, man. And they don't have walkie-talkies anymore because still I'm in the movie genre जहाँ पे सबका walkie-talkie होता है.
होता है उनके पास.
होता है, but not.
But they don't need it like for regular communication now because signals available, and then in general they have like put in so much security. They have made it so secure. Like we didn't feel afraid anywhere from Srinagar to Uri base camp for sure because वहाँ पे पूरा army patrol और वो सब रहता है.
Yeah.
But even from there to LOC, the roads were kind of in a decent shape. There were army convoys in between. There were different checkposts. All those things existed. But generally, everything felt very secure. The locals were moving around in a very regular fashion. For the last 3-4 kilometers, when you go to LOC there, and the last checkpost is called as command post. Actually, आपको river के दूसरे side पे you see Pakistani houses and villages on the other side of the road. So you literally see people living there. And then when you get closer, you actually even see the bunkers of their army guys. So I'd seen a border before in Kutch, but वो border है. This is like the line of control. This is not border. It was very different feeling.
क्या है difference? Like visually, what's the difference?
So in 1948, when the Pakistani raiders attacked then state of Jammu and Kashmir, they were pushed back. Right, the Indian Army came in. The state acceded to the Union of India. The Indian Army came in to save the state. So we came into Srinagar and we kept on pushing these people back. When they were pushed back to Uri, that point, that is when the matter went to the United Nations. And I think they call a stand order or something like that, wherein they said whichever armies are standing wherever they're standing, they'll stay there. So since 1948 till today, the armies are standing at those places. Now that border is disputed. Pakistan claims that this part of Kashmir is theirs. We claim that the other part of the original Jammu and Kashmir, which is as per our map, is totally ours, right? So the disputed border is called the line of control, and that the LOC goes all the way from Kargil and goes all the way near Jammu. And there's a point after which it's not disputed. So there it's called the international border, which is manned by the border security force, and the army is at the back. It's not at the border. Whereas the LOC is manned by the army because it's disputed.
So that's the biggest difference. On all the non-disputed borders, army, according to United Nations, has to stay like 30, 40 kilometers away on both sides. So if you go to any other border, there would be ESF. And actually the India-Pakistan border all the way from Kutch to Kashmir has a fencing, has these solar powered lights all the way from Kutch to Kashmir, which light up at every half a kilometer. Interestingly, it is one of the rare structures which you can see from space if you are in space at night, apart from Great Wall of China and the Great Barrier Reef. So an Indian Army has built this entire infrastructure. But LOC is the sensitive zone. So वहाँ पे जब army deployed, there are bunkers. All these guys are gunned very heavily as opposed to BSF, which has equipment but not as heavy equipment. Most of these guys are in proper shielded bunkers because it's all peaceful until the one bullet is fired, right? And then the action could get very real in these places. So fast forward, like when we reached the command post, so वहाँ पे since we had gone through a reference, they escorted us very nicely. They took us to the lounge. And in the lounge, in the glass window, you can see markings, small holes. And next to it is a sticker, right? Here, 1998 may a bullet passed through this window here. 2004 may pass through this particular hole. So there are real markings of bullets in that room.
Oh my, chill must have run down the spine, man, seeing such things. Ooh.
Yeah, it runs down now. At that time, we were very excited.
In spite of being the only people without a bulletproof vest.
Yeah, exactly. All they say, na, in when you're excited, you're also very stupid. So like very.
We were just very happy to be there.
Yeah.
But
what is a lounge?
So lounge was a place with a few sofas and all that, with a glass window, a glassed out area from where you can see the other side. And the JCO was the JCO, the junior commissioned officer, was the senior most soldier who was serving there. And he was very nice. He was walking us around, and we were obviously getting slowly excited. So he said, "Boss, it's time to bring these two back on Earth." So he pointed out to the other side, which is so you can imagine from where we were standing, the Pakistan side of the LOC was maybe not more than 50 to 100 meters. Meters, right? That is how close it was. And you could see Pakistani locals on the other side. जैसे हम इस तरफ आए हैं, वैसे वो लोग भी अपना post देखने आए थे. And you could see Pakistani markings, and he pointed it out because it was almost 6. So he said, look, the Pakistani flag is actually coming down because, flag has to be brought down at night and brought up back again in the morning. And then he pointed out towards the wall ahead of us, and he said, Saab, सामने आप देख रहे हो? So I said, हाँ. So he said, in all of those walls, there are Pakistani bunkers that you can't see right now, right? Because there's vegetation. That Pakistani bunker, there's a sniper. And he has his sights trained on your head right now.
Oh my God. You have that plus mark on your forehead now.
उसको दिख रहा होगा, हमें नहीं दिख रहा. हम तो we were like completely.
Dude.
So then, slowly, obviously, at that moment, my smile faded away, right? So, because suddenly, you realize you are in someone's sights, and you don't even have a BPJ, and here the BPJ is not going to help you because he has your head in his sights, right?
Correct.
Then he said, "Don't worry, Saab, don't worry, no worries, because our sniper would also have trained his weapon on the other sniper. If he takes a shot at you, we'll take him out."
Oh. तो revenge लिया जाएगा ना, but you are gone.
I said, basically, I'm gone, right? So how will that help me? And he said, हाँ साहब, वो तो है, but we'll tell your family you are very brave.
Was that guy having a real good laugh as well?
I think I was having a solid laugh.
Because I'm sure, like, then he told it to his friends in the evening, bloody civilians.
Bloody civilian. You know, आज दो civilians आए थे, बहुत
Hero
फटक रहे
बन के. हाँ, बहुत फटक रहे थे. Oh my God. Oh my God. So you guys have gone into the database now.
Yeah, we have. You know, for example, in the brigade headquarters, when you are in the brigade HQ, there's a very large field. So I thought it was a football field. And our Kapil basically told us, no, it's a helipad. So we use that. So I said, okay, great. So he said, so you see those hills ahead of you. So there were maybe 5 features, 5 hills, right? So I said, yeah. So he said, there's one regiment on each of those hills. So there's maybe 800 men on each, because that's the level of deployment we have. And they were not huge hills. They were big, but they were not huge. But that's the level of. So he said, no, they were there. So he said either one regiment or one company, about 200 odd men on every hill. And he said, you see that 5th hill far away? I said, yeah. So he said, that is a Pakistani occupied hill. So I said, okay. Yeah. So he said, ab wahan kya hoga? There's an OP. OP is an observation post. So observation post is used to direct artillery fire. तो वो वहां से देख के उसके पीछे जो आर्टिलरी गन्स होते हैं, तोप होते हैं, वहां से he will direct fire onto. He said they can direct accurate fire exactly where you're standing right now.
Just which can be how far?
That's about 50-100 kilometers far. I mean,
that precision.
That precision. And the OPs are very well trained. In fact, the most dangerous people on a battlefield are the observation post officers, because they can direct artillery fire in ways that you can't ever imagine. Now, when he said that, I was standing there thinking, should I run or should I just stand? Like, how real is it that OP who's sitting all the way there is actually going to direct fire? So I said, so what do you think he's doing right now? So he said, right now, he has a book into which he would have made a note that there are 2 stupid civilians along with an officer standing on the helipad. I said, that's all right. He says, no, we are peaceful right now. Don't worry.
They are so casual about things. I'm like, I definitely now have checked my BP. It be like 130, 140, just out of like, queer kinds.
So they're very chilled out about it because इतनी ज़्यादा security वहाँ पे की है, like Sudeep said. So during Kargil war, you remember, like people had to climb all these mountains and a lot of our soldiers lost their lives. Now, actually, on each of these features, one entire company or battalion is deployed, but they are not deployed in bunkers. Like, actually, they've built headquarters on top of these features where they can live. There are barracks on top of it. They are supplied in such a way where if they get cut out for 6 to 9 months, they can still survive with enough oil, food, heating, everything. So they've built infrastructure to another level in these areas after the Kargil war, where now the Pakistan border and the LOC feel so safe because of so much infrastructure, so much work that has gone in there. So the command post where we went, the JCO had hosted us, so they took us to the lounge. But even otherwise, actually, it is a tourist point which our government has created. So, ये line of control है. You see the bridge, and on the bridge there is a white colored thread there, 2/3 across the bridge. So 2/3 part of the bridge is India, and 1/3 part of it is Pakistan. Of course, बनाया सब हमने ही है. They are Bikharis.
Oh yes. Bharat maa ki jai.
But
I'll tell you, not that, because they have no incentive to hold people back from their side, right? Because they would want to infiltrate as many people as they can. We have the incentive to make it because we want to stop infiltration. But we also want to now say that, look, the ceasefire happened there in 2018 and it's held. Right? And it's been 6 years and it's held. And we want to at least open up some of these places to our citizens so that they're able to access.
So it's a tourist spot now. Right? वो कह रहा था कि on weekday 100 people with permission, and on weekends 1,000 people with permission come there as tourists. And there is a cafeteria. Now, you have to understand, it's a very difficult terrain. So, वहाँ पे cafeteria, if they serve coffee and ice cream there, that just talks about the accomplishment of how cool our infrastructure is.
So impressive, man. And mostly things are coming from Srinagar only, like their base of supplies.
Yep.
Probably, right?
Probably.
My God,
And वहाँ पे they've not wrote up, like वहाँ पे banners लगे हुए हैं, Swachh Bharat, G20 summit, Like that's on top of their mind. Like the safety issue has been taken care of.
Oh, very impressive. And while driving up to Uri, do you get all those exciting, border force ke jo posters, be gentle on my curves and things like that?
There was
Border
one
forces put those things, no?
which we liked a lot. वो brigade के अंदर था when we were climbing the hill. It was written like trespassers will be shot at, survivors will be shot again.
Oh my God. हमारे यहाँ पे trespass is prohibited and all आता है ना, shot at. This is too good. Did you guys take pictures of such things?
We're not allowed to take pictures as such, but
Correct. That's true. So
this
are your
one we
phones
couldn't
taken away when you go there?
Not in this particular case. They allowed us phones, but they requested us not to take pictures without permission. But in other cases, like when we went to Gwalior Air Force Base, our phones were taken away. And then we got it back only like at the night when we exited the campus.
Oh. So in Uri, when you go into this bridge they're talking about, this 2/3, 1/3 wala bridge, is this the same bridge where earlier, I mean, this is the bridge connecting the two lands, where earlier there used to be like almost free trade, not free, but whatever, trade between the two countries.
Right. वहाँ से trade used to happen until these routes were stopped because of infiltration. Trade used to happen through this. There is a market like 4 or 5 kilometers away where all these traders who came through that route would come in with their goods and then they would sell it there.
You describe the bunkers and all. How are these bunkers? And if I'm a civilian and if I get permissions to go there, can I visit a bunker as well?
Unlikely that you can visit a bunker. Bunker was difficult actually to get in it. Like I personally felt very claustrophobic within the bunker. It was a long bunker, and then at one point there were probably like a couple of bats as well. So I had peeked out, but somehow maintained my calm because you just had to couch and walk. Like if you stand up, your head would hit on the top.
Yeah.
I kept on telling the JCO saab ki aur dikhao, and I didn't realize that Purav was all uncomfortable. So yeah,
it was difficult when like if these guys like have to stay in those bunkers for long hours, I can imagine they would have to train for it. You can't just go in there and be there.
Also, I wish bunker का एक photo allow कर देते यार. देखने को मिलेगा नहीं, at least photo में देख लेते, but it's okay. I understand the fact that it can't be done.
For someone who's claustrophobic, I can't understand your obsession with bunkers.
देखा नहीं है और शायद देखूंगी भी नहीं. So at least you guys so vividly describe the whole thing. So I'm like, चलो मैंने एक tour कर दिया.
Bunker तो तुम्हें NDA में ही दिखा देंगे. NDA anybody can visit.
Wow. So we had gone to Vietnam, and Vietnam has these very long tunnels, the Puchi tunnels. So I also have a massive claustrophobia problem. But I also have FOMO. So जाना ही जाना है, देखना तो है, मतलब all the way गए हैं तो देखना तो है. Thankfully, for tourism purposes, they have built a lot of exits as well. So our tour guide said, you start within the first 50 meters, you have the first exit, 100 meters second exit, 200 meters third exit. So he said all this. But then you're going in as a group of 3 or 4. You can't run out. I'm like, मैं exit अगर मैं panic होके भागना है, मैं exit कहाँ से करूँगी? So then we also, our group of, thankfully, we were, strangers, so we all said that anyone can panic. So gap ले लेके enter करते हो, because if anyone has to run back. In spite of my heavy FOMO, I had to get out of that 50-meter exit. And as you start, it's not, you have to bend a little bit, but you don't have to bend double. But as you go further in, bending double, crawling, it gets to that level. So, and it got very difficult for me. And it was said that people have stayed in there for months. And we know that in bunkers also people do stay in, right? The army folks do stay during the times of war and all of it.
They have to stay there for long.
For example, if there's an artillery barrage, and the bunkers are constructed in such a way that there's a certain amount of cushioning on top, cushioning through mud and through sand and all that, so that if artillery fire comes, the bunkers won't be affected. So those bunkers actually save lives. And when there was no ceasefire, some of these artillery barrages can happen for 3-4 days non-stop. So they need to be supplied to that extent. So, but yeah, people, bunker living is, if you are an infantry officer or soldier or any army soldier, living in bunkers is like something you have to get used to.
How low are these? Like you have to sit inside it, that kind of height?
Yeah, you have to sit or you have to crouch and walk. they're like intertwining tunnels. You
Okay.
can think of that. There are some areas where there are gun posts, which are hidden and which have some protection through sandbags and stuff like that. But to go and remember, people are deployed at these places. They need to be resupplied ammunition, food, and
Yeah.
all that. So the tunnels are designed in such a way that people can walk through those.
And there are small windows.
Correct. But only not for for you to enjoy the scenery outside. It's only for gun placements.
I like the scenery as well. 2 in 1 ho jayega, you know.
They sometimes we sit here, na, ki they'll feel claustrophobic.
Oxygen bhi to
Like
aana
for
hai.
example, there's comfort is the last thing that they solve for. For example, we travel and we complain about the indigo seat that is becoming thinner and thinner and
I
less
know.
cushioning
Paap
and
padega,
all
nahi?
that. These guys, when they travel, they either sit on the floor or in these transport aircraft, there are these coir chairs on the side, folding chairs.
Right.
So they pull it down and they sit, and no one cares about a nice turn and all that. They just the last thing they care about is the comfort of their cargo, human or otherwise.
Human or otherwise. Oh man, how the hell do they do it? Oh, this is too good. And I mean, does a bunker look like how it looked in the border movie? उसमें bunker जैसे बनाया है ना?
These
like
are
sort
open
of.
bunkers. These are closed bunkers. So you have to climb down, and then the bunker has like some few feet cushioning on top, like Sudeep said. And so it's closed. It's a closed bunker. It's not like an open bunker which they have in the border movie.
The border movie. I'm trying to wonder how close are these movies to the actual real life view of
Some
how
of them are
things
very
are.
close. Like for example, Lakshya is a movie
Yes,
that
fantastic.
one of the most realistic movies that was made. Not just on life in the army, but also the interaction that all of these guys have. Right? They're not saluting each other all the time, and in fact, in the border areas, you're not supposed to salute because the person you salute is a sniper target after that because it's recognized that that person's officer.
He's a senior. Ooh. Oh my God. How do you get to visit such a place as civilian? As in, if I don't have an invitation?
Yeah, as Purav said, command post is accessible. You can go to Uri. I think there's a process, you might find it online, through which you can get a permission to go to command post. And then once you have the permission, you can go. Lots of areas, you might not get access to the bunker.
Correct.
But short of that, you can go and visit command post.
So at command post, at the LOC, they actually have tour guides as well. Like, so they are government appointed, army appointed tour guides who actually walk you through the history. So there is like all these artifacts that they have laid down. There are big charts, so they can walk you through the history of command post. You can take pictures there at designated places. They'll help you with that. So now they've opened up access to this. Similarly,
we have a picture. The regiment there took a picture for both of us and printed it out. Do you have that handy? I thought it was there in your office.
I have the picture. So actually, like when we entered, they took a picture. And by the time we were exiting, they actually created a nice frame and shared it back with us.
Oh, sweet. Nice. Please share that with us. Huh? We put it up in our blog. So we do write a blog at the end of every podcast as well. So definitely we'd like to feature this in the blog, in our Instagram page and things like that. So in this, you said this headquarters in Uri that you guys went to, it has a golf course and a helipad, and all these are for, at least the golf course, these things are made for entertaining all the army folks over there they need something for time pass. Like, what is the psyche behind it?
Yeah, so there's sports, there's there'll be football, there are a couple of tennis courts and all that, and yeah, I think their use of the Uri or Forward Brigade headquarters are not family stations, right? So the families can visit, but the families can't stay for an extended period of time. So there are areas that the families can visit. But essentially, they are there to provide some sort of entertainment for the officers and the men. Also, I think the message you also want to give is कि we are chill. We are not all. I mean, हम सतर्क हैं, लेकिन हम डरे हुए नहीं.
Oh, nice.
So there was one thing, like the officer we met, he talked about chill, like हमारा chill होता है, like यहाँ पे So we went to the mess there for dinner, and army messes are very formal, right? So I always ask Sudeep, have a dress code kya hoga? You have
Yeah,
to.
yeah. Please tell me, क्या पहना आप लोगों ने?
So we want.
I'll tell you. I'll tell you what Purav will tell you what we were more there. But so again, army messes are of multiple types. Okay, there is the regimental mess, which belongs to a regiment. Every regiment will have its own dress code, will have its own history. Some of the regiments in the Indian Army are over 200 years old because the Britishers established them, right? The Sikh regiment, for example, or Marathas and Gurkhas and all that. Some of these regiments are so strict in terms of, the mess etiquette, is that some regiments will insist that you are always in a suit and a tie. If you enter a regiment, you have to be in a suit and a tie. Some regiments say that kids are not allowed. Some regiments will have this whole thing that you can only, and there's an etiquette around eating also. So when you are sitting at a table, the senior-most officer sits at the head of the table, and the meal will start when he or she starts eating and will end when that individual stops eating. So
irrespective of whether my plate is done or not.
Exactly. So when he
generally understanding होते, they would not finish it, but
yeah.
But sometimes punishment के case में करते हैं. They finish it very quickly so that other people. We have youngsters who've gone to the town and created some ruckus, and you want to punish them. So you
Gobble
do
up.
a formal. Yeah, no, not even gobble. आप घर से खा के आते हो.
One step ahead.
No, exactly. So if you're a youngster, ना तो क्या होता है कि youngsters eat at the mess because they don't have a home to go to, so to say. They live in the mess, they eat at the mess. So the punishment dinner is such that all the officers will come together. The seniors will eat at home, and there's a proper seated this thing, and the senior most officer will take his fork and a knife, will take one bite and close the course. So then the course is removed, and these guys are staring at the food. And usually these dinners happen at midnight, so that there's no food outside also. So imagine there's food in front of you, but you cannot eat it. And so that's
it's
the way
wicked.
they punish.
It's just wicked, man.
कभी-कभी होते हैं the youngsters they get into a fight somewhere and किसी ने police station जला दिया. Things like that.
Police station जला दिया. बहुत ज़्यादा है.
It's like Giovanni खून, garam खून.
For destruction of public property. So then they have to be punished. So that's the way they punish. Anyways, some of the younger regiments, which are maybe only 50 years old and all that, they are a lot more okay. So, for example, the regimental mess to which I've had access was the 8th Battalion of the Mahar Regiment that my co-brother was a part of. And there the rule was shoes and trousers and shirt. That's a formal attire. You don't need to wear a tie. You don't need to wear a jacket. And people had open access to the mess and all that, but you have to follow those rules, right? The brigade messes are less formal because they belong to a brigade, but the regiments that are part of that brigade will have their own mess. So, wo chalega. Similarly, NDA mess is slightly less formal. And because this brigade mess is actually in a field area, it was relatively less formal. So, what Kapil told us is he said, wear jeans and shoes and shirt chalega.
Okay.
So we wore jeans and shoes. I asked, that's one thing I do. I always ask specifically, is like, what's the dress code?
Correct.
Because I will eat in the mess. Because Purav and I want access to the mess. Because that's a very important part of the entire
and they do the messes well, right? So जैसे यहाँ पे उसे mess के बाहर एक उसे lounge area, they had the entire history of the brigade put up there. So then he walked us through some of the history, what were the key events, key achievements of the brigade. But ज़्यादा formal होता है. So like when they do appetizers with the drinks, yeah, they don't serve it in a plate. वो एक बंदा tray लेके आता है, you take a toothpick, you take one piece, then he goes away. Then if you want a second, he'll come back and then he'll again go away. जैसे कि यहाँ plate रख के जाओ, लेकिन that's not etiquette.
That's not done. And in regimental messes, the mess havaldar who runs the mess, one of his jobs is to ensure that no glass is empty. So you can get easily drunk. Okay, because and you have to pace yourself because आपका glass empty हुआ, there's no gap. The moment your glass is entering the last whatever little bit of liquid in it, there will be a guy at your elbow with a refill. And refill
उसको
ऐसा नहीं
पता
कि वो
होता है, सब रटा होता है. Everybody is having a different drink. He would know किसको कितना आइस चाहिए, कितना पानी चाहिए, क्या चाहिए. He would know.
Wow.
But so here, after that, we had dinner, and then we said, we asked, yeah, will any of the other officers be joining us? तो उन्होंने बोला कि नहीं यार, हमने ना chilled out कर दिया है. कभी कभी क्या होता है कि शाम को everybody has light food, तो they don't even need to wear formal clothes. They can come in and they can eat at the bar. Of course, they can't sit on the table. We are not barbarians. Okay.
Wow.
तो and then he said कि यार रात को ना लाइट खाते हैं because what happens is रात को हम बॉर्डर पे काफी एक्टिविटी चलती है. We have all these border patrols at night. We have this emergency rescue teams, ERTs चलती है. तो रात को थोड़ा लेट हो जाता है. ड्रिल्स कब तक, तो 2:30-3 बजे तक ड्रिल्स चल सकती है. So these guys are busy, but हमने मॉर्निंग में लाइट कर दिया है इनके लिए. They can come in at 6.
Oh. 6 is like midnight for me. Oh my God.
Right, look at Kapil's thinking. His whole logic is, I will avoid drinking at night, and I will have something very light at night, because if I'm woken up at 3 in the morning, because we need to remember Uri Brigade headquarters was the headquarters that was attacked. Remember the Uri movie?
Yes, absolutely.
The Uri Brigade headquarters was the one that was attacked by those suicide bombers. We lost so many soldiers. In fact, Kapil took us on that whole pathway, because from the Uri Brigade headquarters, the nearest Pakistani side of the border, nearest is about 4 kilometers. So
That's
there's
it.
a hill, and beyond the hill, there's Pakistan.
Wow.
Because Uri is like a dagger. It goes inside Pakistani territory. It's surrounded by Pakistan on all 3 sides.
Oh.
Right. So yeah. So they are. So his whole logic is, look, if someone wakes me up at 3 in the morning, I need to be up. I shouldn't be hungover. I shouldn't, things like that. So it's amazing how they think.
Always sharp.
Disciplined. Very disciplined.
But the facilities were so nice. The room that Purav and I got was like a 5-star almost. You couldn't believe that you were this close to a very inhospitable place, and you're still living
a very comfortable evening.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Oh wow, you got access to the mess and the stay and all that. That's so lovely. How was that walk? That walk that you said that Kapil took you. I mean, I should call him Colonel Kapil, name changed person, took you. How it's like a hike or it's like a trek? What's the terrain like?
So there are so many motorable roads that we didn't feel the need to trek anywhere. We were prepared, thoda shoes, and all that. But we got into this car. We got on top of the hill. We were on top of the hill in 3 minutes. And then he talked about these posts, and there are posts everywhere. Like literally every 100 meters, there'll be a post. And there are a lot of dogs, by the way. And that's very important. So they have
Trained
a lot of
dogs.
these stray dogs that they've trained and adopted. And I remember 1 or 2 of them started barking at us initially, and they very quickly figured out 2 things. One is they're friendly, and second is they're useless. So not a threat at all. Like Major Patak told me at the SSB all those years ago, this dog also said कि तुमसे नहीं हो पाएगा.
Dogs are very
And then
smart
they became
like
very
that.
friendly.
Oh, I love mountain dogs. Are so cute. They are all like this little puffy, round, a lot of fur
Puffy,
kinds.
yeah, very furry.
Oh, I love
I was scared,
dogs.
dude. Like one of them started barking at us, and भाई यार यहाँ पे please माफ कर दे.
मैं भाग भी नहीं पाऊंगा. Oh man, Uri must have been like very, very alag types experience, no?
I was out of the world. Like, and all this in one day, right? Like,
yeah.
Started at 6 a.m., reached there 3, stayed till the night. Next day morning, 7 a.m. we left. They packed breakfast for us. 11 baje airport se flight leke. By lunch, we're back at home.
You guys did not extend a small vacation after that. All the way chale gaye the.
Kapil told us. Kapil was like, "क्या एक दिन में जा रहे हो?
Like, you're the most stupid people I've ever seen. Like, now Vicky Kaushal आता है तो वो भी 2 दिन रुकता है.
part 2 के book में ऐसे करके करना, हाँ, when you do the second part of your book, everywhere stay for 2-3 days.
The thing I really love wherever I go to these places are talking to the actual troops, right? Because these guys, I met a guy who was from Hyderabad actually, so I spoke to him in Telugu.
Oh.
I met a guy who was from the Maratha regiment and all that. I just love talking to them about where they're from, what they're going to do next, because typically they have a 15-year service window as opposed to officers who have a 10-year service window. So they start getting their pension after 50. Now with the Agniveer program, that number will reduce further, right? But it was amazing to talk to them and all that. And they once they realize that these guys don't have akkad, na? Sometimes there's this thing that saab ke guest hain, to akkad hogi, wo ye, and all that. But then they really open up, and it was very nice talking to them. I always enjoy talking to the people on the ground because they become very unfiltered very quickly.
So, any amazing stories you remember, or some conversations that
no, I think one story I'll tell you. We waited at one place, and then we met this Jawan, and he showed us. He said, "You see that wire? That's the fence." So he showed us the fence. So he said the fence goes from there and here and all that. And he said to the right side of that fence is India, and to the left side is the Pak occupied Kashmir. And so I said, so it's something interesting that you can tell us about the fence. So he said, once in a while, what happens is there's a power failure. Okay. And because the fence is lit at night. And he said on one of these occasions when the power failed, the Pakistanis panicked because they don't have any light on their side. So he said they panicked because they thought that we were going to attack.
Oh.
So they turned on their torches and they started yelling loudly.
Okay.
And he said, although the power was back, we thought we could have a bit more fun, so we didn't turn it on. So those guys didn't sleep the whole night.
सारे के सारे शाने हैं, सब शाने हैं. I like how they can have fun in such places, man.
I said, really? He said, हाँ, पूरी रात उनकी फटी रही, बहुत मजा आया. An officer might not have told us this, right? But this Jawan, once he became very comfortable with us, you're like, you know what we did last summer times.
Oh God, such light-hearted conversations are fun, man. Okay, so this was your story about all your experiences in Uri. Phenomenal. Yeah. Before we head into the next part of it, let's take a little short break. A commercial break? Not really. This is a request to you to check out our Labor of Love, a newsletter on Substack called Sneaky Footprint. It's from our team at Misadventures of a Sneaker. We write about travel, vacations, travel tips, anecdotes, lots of pictures, and of course, suggested itineraries too. We have also started a new service of curating travel itineraries to the destinations made just for you. So if you want to get a vacation planned, leave us a note on Instagram or DM us on our Substack page, and we will plan something super special for you. You can support us by following and subscribing to our newsletter and Instagram page. We are called Misadventures of a Sneaker. All the links mentioned are in the show notes. Thank you. All right, welcome back from the break. So tell us now, how was the trip to NDA? I mean, I had one batchmate who, after we finished our 12th, he had applied for NDA. He got through and he joined. And I think in 2 weeks, he ran back and came back home. So we used to, before he left for NDA, we were like, तुम तो dude हो, you can do it, तुम तो करने वाले हो, सोचो तुम पहली बार वापस आओगे तो कितने hot लगोगे, एकदम बाल वाल ऐसे होगा, तुम shades पहनोगे. We were like hyping him up because all army guys are supposed to be hot, right? So and then he came back running and then he said it was so tough. मेरे से नहीं हो पाया. They will never accept me again. So that door is closed for me, but it was just impossible. How was your experience of seeing the place, seeing people train there and all of it?
Look, as Purav said, my co-brother used to be in a senior position at the NDA. And what that ensured is that we got almost unhindered access. मेरी जो भी कसर थी मैंने पूरी निकाल दी because although I couldn't make it to NDA, I would have visited NDA 15-20 times during that time. I went to the squadrons. Squadrons are the hostels. and they are named alphabetically. They start with A and I think now go till Q.
Okay.
I'm not sure. Maybe till Q, I'm not sure. And November, N is November. So November squadron was where my co-brother, passed out from. It was amazing. I mean, it's you see the background. It's a lot like that. It's green. It's huge. It's very large. They have a small airstrip to train the Air Force cadets. So it's a 6-term program. Only in term 6 do you specialize. So for the first 5 terms, you are being taught how to be a leader. And only in term 6 do the Air Force guys do courses which are specific to Air Force, Army, specific to Army. There's a very large lake in the India, so the Navy cadets actually go and train on that lake. And the hierarchies are very clear, right? So first termers are the bachas, so they are treated like shit. And 6 termers are the senior most, so they are treated like kings. And the need to respect authority and the need to inculcate discipline is effectively the job of your immediate senior term, right? So when you become second termers, you can bully the first termers. and it's crazy, like there's something called he's my squad type, which is we were in the same squadron. He's my school type, which is we have come from the same school. Or he's my city type, which is he and I are from the same city. But the most popular type is the punishment type, which is he and I got the same punishment at the same time, and we used to keep on getting the same punishment, right?
So bonding हो गया punishment के ऊपर.
Bonding with punishment is the nature. Like, if you are a first termer, your destiny is to keep on getting punished. And punishment is for silliest of reasons, right? I mean, you can't escape it. You can do everything right, and you just can't escape it. And punishment is you do rolling, you do push-ups, you have the grill on top of your rooms, right? Room ke upar grill hota hai, ventilation grill. So you'll hold on to the ventilation grill for the whole night. If you fall asleep, you'll fall, right? So you have to hold on to the ventilation grill for the whole night. You have to hold on. So, you'll walk by, and I have very fond memories of the tree. And I'm like, why? Because I spent 3 nights in a row on that tree because I needed to get punished. So
And they found
things like
novel
that.
ways of punishments.
Very normal, and they get super careful. Like, for example, if you are overweight, your punishment is they won't let you eat, right? And you need, and they just don't have time. If you're in a junior term, you don't have enough time to eat. It's not as if food is not there. The calorie recommendation for a cadet is 4,500 calories a day. That is how much a cadet needs. But you just don't have time. And that denying you food is a very normal punishment methodology, right? They would not let you eat. When we walked into the mess, you could see like complete table of cadets eating, and there'll be 3 cadets who are looking up, right? And that they're being punished. So they are asked to look up and they can't eat. And the whole lunch service will last for about 10 minutes. And only in the 8th minute, they'll be asked to. So 2 minutes में वो जितना खा सकते हैं खा लो, right?
Oh my God.
But I think what they're doing, Revati, in that whole thing is they are preparing you for a life of hardship. And life is tough, right? Captain Raghuram has this amazing story where he's at the IMA, Indian Military Academy. And in his hostel, the officer who's in charge of the hostel comes and asks these first termers saying that, is everything okay? And this guy says, sir, I have a request. And he says, sure. He said, sir, 4 baje hame chai aur biscuit milte hain. But what ends up happening is that the biscuits are not enough. So the senior termers actually end up eating all the biscuits. So there are enough biscuits left for us. He said, no, good point. So he then called the senior most guys and he punished the life out of them, right? And he said, look at what kind of training you're giving this idiot. Because all he's worried about right now are the biscuits he's not getting. Tomorrow, when he's sitting in that bunker, remember? And there's shelling happening, and for 3 days he has to survive only on water, right? Will he again go asking for biscuits? Kisse mangega? Dushman se mangega?
So the punishment is not because they're eating it, it's because these guys are focusing on
the irrelevant things as per that, right? The more important things to focus on. your comfort is not that important. And punishment also is interesting in the sense that a sixth termer will never directly punish a first termer, right? If a first termer does something wrong with the sixth termer will punish the fifth termer, the fifth fourth, fourth third, third second, second first. Because the whole logic is, what kind of training are you giving your juniors? You know,
And very basic things, like you're at the NDA campus, it's a very large campus, very large campus. You are not allowed to walk. You can either be marching or running. You can't be walking. अगर आप चलते हुए पकड़े गए तो you get punished. So imagine, like, it's very basic things on which you can be punished at times on multiple occasions.
Wow. So actually, when you're walking around, even for example in Uri or in your Gwalior airbase, wherever, this one of these places, you don't see people loitering, is it?
Walking तो करते हैं, but loitering का तो time ही नहीं होता है, उसकी तो गुंजाइश ही नहीं है. The Air Force guys are generally like a bit cooler as compared to the Army guys. So they would walk, वो थोड़े ऐसे cooler style में रहते हैं compared to the Army guys. But Army guys are generally like, if they walk very erect with a purpose, going to a particular place. ऐसे.
The thing is, the whole logic is that you can't let your guard down, right? So you have to always keep the intensity up. And then what happens is third term, fourth term onwards, it becomes second nature.
Yeah.
Right? And because, you know, the thing about us is we are an officer-led army. And that's where the essence of the book is, which is in the corporate world, we've seen that leadership is trial and error. No one teaches us to be a good leader. Leaders emerge. Some of them are good, some of them are bad. Those bad habits get compounded by the time you become more senior. And that's when the leadership interventions in the corporate world happen. But then it's very difficult to change the persona of a leader. Whereas in the armed forces, because we are an officer-led army, you have, when Colonel Kapil did what he did in Kupwara, he was only 25, 26 years old, right? And I don't even want to think what I was doing when I was 26.
Embarrassing.
Right? So, when you have such, strong responsibilities on your young shoulders, you cannot afford to put your guard down. You cannot afford to show poor leadership. And all these are things like, one of them was talking to us about, say the higher reaches of Kashmir when there's snowfall. And he was telling us that sometimes snow falls continuously for 72 hours. And when you are in your tent, you have to keep digging the snow out. Right? And he said, if you stop, then you'll get blanketed and you'll die. So I said, but why don't you take a break and the men can keep digging? He says, boss, if I go to sleep, they'll go to sleep. He says, I go to sleep, they'll say, okay, saab so gaye hain. I think it's all okay.
So always lead by example, kinds.
Always lead by example. Always lead from the front. So that's very particular to the Indian Army. If you look at the officer casualties we have, on a per capita basis, we have the highest officer casualty rate anywhere in the world. Because our officers lead from the front, and the logic is very simple. When you're facing a hail of bullets, why would someone else go? Like you says, all orders are down the window at that point.
Yeah.
Right. So the whole logic is, if I go, and he said something very interesting. This officer we were talking to, he said, "Boss, I got to tell you this. If there's firing that's happening, and if I lead from the front, my men work overtime to keep me safe." Right? They will say कि साहब आगे हैं तो साहब को गोली नहीं लगनी चाहिए, right? So they will ensure that there is alternate fire coming. They'll ensure that there's always covering fire and all that. He says the chances of all of us living are higher when I lead from the front.
I genuinely don't get how this psyche is built. It's phenomenal. Even in the story in which you spoke about the overnight operation that they did, the air operation that they did, where he went and asked his team, who wants to, it's a near fatal operation, who would want to do it? And all of them put their hands up. Meri jaan pyari hai. I am very patriotic. I'm genuinely a very patriotic person. But at the end of the day, meri jaan pyari hai. I want to live till 100. How does one not think about your own life and still go ahead? I mean, there has to be something about the training.
There's a lot of regimentation, right? So, for example, there are, I think, 31 PVCs, Paramveer Chakras, which is the highest ever decoration in the history of Indian Armed Forces. And a regiment which gets a gallantry award like this, those regiments are celebrated because like for example, Vijay's regiment that I've spent some time with, 8 Mahar. They were awarded a PVC for action in the Sri Lanka campaign, IPKF campaign. So they are known as the PVC Paltan, right? So now in the 8 Mahar unit, every officer is taught from day one that this regiment or this unit is a PVC unit. So we cannot sully the name of. So that's registration, right? So you're taught from day one saying that, boss, your life is forfeit, right? And that's where, if you read that story in Manipur, Colonel Pillai's story, unlimited liability. So that's the whole logic, which is, an officer's liability is unlimited. An officer's liability towards his mission and his people is unlimited. And what that means is, contrary to what you are talking about, Revati, contrary to natural instinct. Your natural instinct is to preserve yourself.
Yeah.
An officer acts contrary to that natural instinct, because for the officer, the regiment ki shaan, the validity of the mission, the lives of the men that he or she commands come before his own life. And they're taught that from day one. I mean, number of officers that Purav and I have spoken to, whoever lost someone, even today they'll remember that day, and they'll get emotional, and then they'll say कि यार मुझे नहीं करना चाहिए था. I should have done something different. Had I taken the left fork and not the right fork, this man would still be alive, right? He's carrying that guilt even today, and they're taught like that. Their thought was, every individual that you command, their lives are so precious, right? That तुम गए तो गए, उनको नहीं बनना चाहिए. And that's the only reason why men follow. Else men, everyone, they value their lives. So the only reason they follow these officers is because they know that as long as the officer is good, I'm safe.
Yeah, the officer values their life more than his own life kinds as well. Oof, this is so inspiring. Maza aata hai just to imagine their psyche and what must go through their heads at that point. It's just phenomenal. Okay, so I'm bringing us back to your experience at the NDA. So NDA also has one of these motivational visit kind of things where civilians can go and they can apply for it and go and visit it. They have it on Sundays for a couple of hours and all of it. How was it for you guys? The legendary NDA mess, the Sudan block that we've heard of, the huge gardens and the lake there, and all these hot jawans marching around. चलो आप लोग को hot नहीं लगेगा, मुझे hot लगेगा.
They are hot and sweaty. Trust me.
मैं दूसरे hot की बात कर रही थी, HAWT वाला hot.
अच्छा.
So how was it, getting into NDA? It's almost like getting an access into their lives, right?
To me, it was just amazing. Like, you're in awe of the place. The aura around this place is just amazing. And then, so 2-3 things that stood out. Everything is just so grand and huge, right? Like the Sudan block or the mess, you go to the mess can feed 600 people at the same time. Large desks, very formal architecture, very beautiful. With that, there's like incredible discipline, which you generally don't find in our country, right? And you crave for it, like pin drop silence, discipline, everybody is courteous, polite, everything is in order. And then at every place, what they have done really well is they have kind of put in those pictures, those stories, artifacts from the past. So this entire regimentation, which Sudeep talked about, starts there, right? For everything, there is a story behind it. There is a history behind it. And as you walk through that, people start explaining to you the story, the old artifacts, those things. When you start seeing again, like, you feel both combination of being very inspired, but also at the same time feel like, yaar, main apni zindagi ke saath kya kar raha hu? Like, you're probably doing nothing, right? And that was the feeling throughout the entire visit to the NDA, whether it was the mess, the admin block, The museum is really beautiful. It talks about the history of different wars in India. They have some documentary there around like how cadets are trained at NDA. It's a beautiful documentary that they play in the movie theater there. The place where we stayed, like one of the guest houses, like the who's who in the army or the politicians would have stayed there. The mess or the lounge, like Jawaharlal Nehru inaugurated that place. So that place has its own history. So you feel like in that short time span, you visited, you're walking right back into the history in the place where it all started, where it all happened. It's an amazing feeling, and I've only visited twice. Sudeep's visited many times, so he can talk about very specific things. It's amazing.
Wow. This year is also NDA 75th year since it got the stone was laid kind of.
A big thing happened about 2 years ago when the first batch of women cadets was accepted into the NDA, right? And I think and that also coincided with the army offering permanent commission to women officers. So we'll have more and more female cadets also now pass out of the NDA. I mean, so yeah, I mean, look,
wonderful.
Many ways, it's as difficult to get into the NDA as it is to get into any of the other premier institutions in the country.
Tougher, I would say. Tougher, I would say, because here you have to clear many more. I mean, there is just academics, right? Here it's more.
Correct. And the cadets are also like very clear-eyed. When we spoke to a few of them, they were very clear-eyed. They knew what they were getting into. So it's amazing. I think warfare will change, as you can see now. When you look at the Ukraine war, you look at the other conflicts that are happening. There'll be a lot more focus on technology. And I'm sure that some of these young officers that are joining India today will sort of lead that change in warfare that we'll also have to go through.
Correct. Training also will be different for them, I'm sure, because they have to learn all these different tech warfare as well. Oh my God.
Correct.
So you have to be crazily on time every time you enter NDA.
Any meeting with anyone from the armed forces, you have to be on time, especially from the army, right? I think the Air Force guys can be a little, chilled out. The Army and Navy, I've realized you have to be on time. And they make good-natured fun of the Air Force guys. They call them the Chair Force.
I read that. I like how they keep up their sense of humor through all this, man. It's too much. Like even that one thing that you had written, that one placard that was there when you entered, I think the Gwalior airbase, difference between God and an Air Force pilot. Oh, these things are all like good humor, man, and they're putting it up on a placard and things.
Not just any Air Force pilot, a fighter pilot. So the fighter pilots within the Air Force
it's different.
Are, different. कुछ अलग ही उनका रोब होता है. So the placard basically said that the difference between God and a fighter pilot is that God doesn't think he's a fighter pilot.
ऐसा टशन होना चाहिए. Confidence is like sky high. How was the Gwalior airbase?
It was very access was very difficult. We had to submit our phones at the entrance to the airbase, and then we had to go to the actual squadron, where the Mirage squadron. This squadron was the one that participated in the Balakot airstrikes, and it was amazing. Look, I'm like a little kid when it comes to aircraft, right? Fighter aircraft and all that. By the way, the Gwalior Air Force Base also has something called a TACD, TACD, which is the equivalent of the Indian Air Force's Top Gun, right? So Top Gun is the best of the best go and get trained there. So the best of the best fighter pilots in the Indian Air Force go to TACD. So they have multiple aircraft types. It was just like a kid in a candy store. And the Air Force guys have their own random sense of humor. It's very different from the Army guys, right? I remember we spent the whole day. We spent some time in the Mirage simulator also, and it was amazing. Like in the Army, when someone says "ki ye karo," so there's no if or but. But in our case, we are sitting with Shaurya, who's the protagonist of our story. And he had to
Judge.
depute.
I love the name.
By the way, made up name. The actual name is something
love
else.
the name.
So we're sitting with him, and he had to depute someone who will come with us to the simulator building and walk us through the whole simulation. So this young fighter jock comes in, and Shaurya looks at him. He says कि भाई काम कर, ये हमारे guests हैं, तो इनको ना अभी वो fighter simulator training room में ले जा, and just walk them through everything. Okay, I think they'll really value. So this guy calmly looks back at Shaurya. He said, "Sir, actually, sorry, I can't do it right now, क्योंकि I have some work that I need to finish and I have some courses that I have to finish. तो आप ना किसी और से पूछ लो." So there was like this uncomfortable silence.
कोर्ट मार्शल हो गया होता अगर आर्मी में होता.
In the army, they would have been shot.
But these guys are coming up the same process, man. I mean, how come they are not having the you never say no to your senior kinds?
Think about it. A typical squadron has 16 fighter aircraft, okay, and would have 20 fighter pilots, give or take. And then they'll have maybe engineers. So the officer to non-officer ratio in the Air Force will probably be 1:1, 1:2. I don't know the actual number, but in the Army it could be 1:20, 1:30. Right? So Army is a lot more regimented. Whereas remember, in the Air Force there are ranks, but they are colleagues, then subordinates.
Your pals.
Right? So someone like Shaurya will be leading 4 fighter contingent. He'll order around the remaining 3, but he's the first among equals. They're as good as he is, right? So he said कि आप किसी और से पूछ लो. Then Shaurya looked at us. He said, "Just wait for a minute, okay?" उसको बाहर ले गया. And then he came back, and then he said, "Sorry, sir, I'll take care of it. Why don't you guys come with us?" So he took us, right? Later on, I told Shaurya, and I said, I asked him, I said, "So what, you ordered him?" He says, "No, he'll ask me to F off if I order him, right?" I told him, I said, "Look, these two are civilians. They have come from outside. They have come out of interest. And they also have come here to congratulate us for the mission that we did. And I think we owe it to them. We have to be nice to them. They're civilians, I get it. I've invited them here, but they know everything, and they've come from a point of admiration for us and what we do.
Wow.
If you spend half an hour, 1 hour of your time, it'll mean a lot. And end of the day, they're citizens of our country, aren't they?" So he said, "Okay, now that makes that makes sense."
Senti ho gayi hai sun ke. What a lovely conversation to have, right? It's not that you're admonishing the person, or it's just a conversation you have had where you're telling them that this is what it is and you should have done this way. It's a beautiful.
And also we keep bearing gifts, so because we got so emotional when that thing happened, and I've known Shaurya for a long time, so I knew that he was involved, and I knew his regiment was involved, his squadron was involved. So we had 3 or 4 of single malt bottles also as a small token of our appreciation. So finally, when everything else failed, he said, "Pata hai, they also got a single malt." So he said, "Okay, now."
अभी चलो, मैं सब छोड़ दूंगा, ट्रेनिंग में रहने दो.
ये पहले क्यों नहीं बताया?
Oh, and my single malt is what talks. Then how was it sitting in the simulator?
I felt very stupid. It didn't know jack shit, to be honest.
But दिखता कैसा है? How is it like? How does it? How do you see
it? It was my second time in the simulator, and the backstory is, went for the first time long time ago. Shaurya was the officer deputed to help me, and the guy just kept yelling at me all the time, right? Because there's obviously a joystick by which you control, and then there's a throttle on your left. The throttle has like 6 buttons that each of your fingers is supposed to handle. And उसने सब समझा दिया मुझे कि ऐसे 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 करो, ऐसे करो, ऐसे करो. अब मुझे कुछ चमका नहीं. And every time he would ask me, "Press the 4th button. What are you doing?" This, that. He started yelling at me. So this guy, it's like a dome. Simulator dome. The aircraft doesn't move. The dome gives you the impression that it's moving. It's like a large screen, right? It's a dome screen.
You sit in the plane, so it feels very real. Like If your aircraft goes like this, you feel like your body is moving against gravity. So you get the entire feeling. You can get disoriented within the dome very quickly if you don't have control.
Like one of those universal rides where you get inside and things happen like this 40, 50, 60 things.
Yeah, something like that. But like Purav said, you feel very stupid because you can't even land properly. You can't take off properly. When he says turn left, you're turning right.
Very incompetent. Plane crash हुआ फिर से, then he used the command, crash हुआ फिर से landing कराओ, landing sequence load करो, and then you land again, you crash again.
There's a guy outside who's doing all this, right? Who's landing these, who's programming all these. तो बोलता है अच्छा फिर से कर दिया इसने crash, फिर से चालू करो.
But a reality strike हो जाता है. Oh my God, we are not as cool as we think we are. Not at all.
Not at all.
But how are the control? Do you have like a full control thing in front of you in
proper
the simulator?
It's a proper cockpit of the fighter aircraft. It has all the controls that you typically see in a fighter aircraft, except it's not taking off. That's how they train.
There's this movie, called Sully. Yeah. I think Tom Hanks, where he's landed his flight in that New York river. And so then there's a hearing, and in the hearing, he has to prove that he only could land in the river. There was no other way that he could have prevented it. So there they actually go into a simulator where he shows different scenarios on how the landing actually happens. And that simulator looks fascinating, even when you see it on TV. Like for us, that scene is such a lovely scene that I'm remembering it while you're talking about the simulator thing. So that's why I was wondering, actually sitting in one, is it like as cool, and do you actually get the feel of,
It's very cool for the first 2 minutes. And then when you actually start flying, you feel very stupid. And after some time, you want to get off the simulator because you're making such a mess.
But it does feel cool.
Like lucky, the officer, the fighter pilot who was with us was very nice. Imagine my situation when Shaurya was in my ear all the time.
That guy was nice. The guy who took us was very nice. He was very patient. After 3-4 minutes, like Sudeep said, I was like, boss, I'm done. नहीं पूरा कर लो अब 10-15 मिनट का कोटा जो भी तुम्हें मिला है.
It's because of the single malt. He was very thankful.
We could have helped, I think. We could have had a couple.
Maybe then you guys would have been like rock star. गाड़ी तेरा भाई चलाएगा वैसे हो जाता है एकदम.
At night, we were invited to Shaurya's house for dinner.
So we wanted to go to the mess, by the way. Like we said, like mess में ले चलो हमें यार. Like we'll have this dinner, drink. तुम्हारे 2-3 दोस्तों को बुलाना. We want to hear their stories. Like mess में कौन जाता है? We don't go to the mess. There is nobody at the mess.
So different.
Come to my house. So then we went, 2 of us, like formals, pant, shirt, formal pant, leather shoes. And ये सब भाई 3/4 पहन के टी-शर्ट पहन के they're laughing at us कि ये कौन idiots है.
At one place you go over prepared, one place you go under prepared. ऐसे हो जा रहा है.
Yeah. We enter there and they're all waiting. They're all staring at us and laughing and all that. And after some time they started ignoring us. Then they were talking, and the conversation was fascinating. And we carry a snippet in our book also. Look at the nightmares they get, right? So Shaurya and one of his colleagues was talking, and this guy was a MiG-21 pilot before. Now he used to fly Sukhois when we met him, but he's trained on MiG-21s, and MiG-21s are extremely difficult aircraft to fly. So he was looking at Shaurya. He said, "पता है मुझे उस दिन ना डरावना सपना आया." तो Shaurya said, "क्या हुआ?" He said, "पता है मैं ORP पे था." ORP is Operational Readiness Patrol, which essentially is a aircraft which is fully fueled, fully armed. Wherever, there's a sudden emergency, the pilot is waiting nearby. He gets into the aircraft and he has to be airborne within 5 minutes of the alarm ringing, right? And this could be a commercial aircraft that has deviated, so then you have to go and you have to check kya hua hai. So he said, I was in the ORP, I was sitting, the alarm rang, and I ran to the aircraft. MiG-21 था, तो मैं अंदर बैठ गया. I got strapped in, and then I was searching. I couldn't find the starter button. Then, everyone was yelling. My crew chief was waiting for me to go. Time was running out, and I couldn't find where the starter button was. So I woke up in a pool of sweat. Then Shaurya said, "But वो left में होता है ना?" तो हाँ इसलिए तो डरावना सपना था ना, मुझे दिखा नहीं, दैट वाज माय नाइटमेयर। इनके सपने भी कैसे होते हैं।
Oh, it's like there is a subconscious level where they are always kind of getting ready or something like that. Oh, yeah, I remember the
He
story.
also met one of his other friends. वो थोड़ा late आया. So इन सबका होता है कि we want to go to TACD for training. So this guy was an instructor at TACD. So like एकदम वो Tom Cruise types. तो
I was going to सब लोग क्या Ray-Ban पहन के Tom Cruise जैसे hot लगते हैं,
हाँ
ऐसे घूमते हैं क्या?
बिल्कुल उसी स्टाइल से.
The good looking. I'll tell you one small snippet. Okay, this Army Air Force का जो ये होता है ना. So next day we woke up and we went for breakfast and he asked us कि क्या खाओगे, तो we said क्या है, तो we said अंडे, तो I said omelette. तो omelette हो गया, चाय वाय पी ली. All this happened. I came back home, right? And Harita is from an army background, my wife. So she said, breakfast में क्या खाया? I said omelette. Perfect बना होगा ना omelette? I said, what do you mean? जलाया नहीं होगा ना, आर्मी में हमेशा हम जला देते हैं, साले एयरफोर्स वाले ऑमलेट भी परफेक्ट बनाते हैं.
So goodness, in such a small thing and they know a difference.
Very Airforce guys, everything has to be perfect, right? Omelette is also perfect and pure. I said, yeah, it was very nice. It was perfect.
This is too much. So cute. Oh man. Purav, you were telling something about this guy who came late from the TACD.
So that guy was a TACD instructor. So he was teaching fighter pilots. So that day we learned. So TACD में all the instructors have a call sign which is changed. So each guy has a call sign and all like call signs are also very cool. Like ऐसे बेकार नाम नहीं होते, सब cool नाम होते हैं, सब लोग cool होते हैं. But they changed their call signs to either a Pakistani or a Chinese guy. So each fighter pilot who is an instructor either flies China or Pakistan. And then they research on it. पूरा उसके अराउंड एक थॉट प्रोसेस बनाते हैं कि हाउ वुड दे डू दिस, हाउ वुड दे डू दैट, एंड उसके अराउंड दे कंस्ट्रक्ट मिशंस. सो द लेवल ऑफ डेप्थ टू व्हिच दे गो टू ट्रेन इट्स जस्ट अमेजिंग. एंड देन ही वाज लाइक कि तुम यहाँ क्या कर रहे हो, लाइक क्या रिसर्च कर रहे हो.
His nameplate, his call sign, it said Khalid. Okay. So I said, hi Khalid, I'm Sudeep. He says, no, I'm Paras.
Your call sign is also proper name. It's not like you have like some eucalyptus as a random name.
Not like that. Actually, living the life of a Pakistani pilot, all his fighting strategies, everything, his mindset is he's put himself.
वो persona में घुसता है वो. You would read their literature, news, everything. Then you would fly like them.
Oh, solid. And really, everyone's wearing a Ray-Ban and walking around and all of it. Huh?
Yeah, 100%.
All of them. They would wear a Ray-Ban, they would wear their overalls, and they would like walk like cool dudes. ऐसे खड़े भी ऐसे हमारी तरह नॉर्मल ऐसे स्टाइल में खड़े होते हैं.
Oh, the profile types. Man, I have to find a way to go to Gwalior airbase.
This hot dreams you have, right? Wait for a little while till they get commissioned, because then the Air Force guys are the real cool dudes.
पूरे टाइम उस persona में रहते हैं.
Very hot and very cool. Purav, did you go? I didn't ask you. You're the marathon guy, right? Did you go running in the India campus along with the Baki Jawans?
You know,
हमारी पहले बहुत हो रही थी.
I always remember the sign: trespassers will be shot. Survivors will be shot again.
Oh man! But tell me one thing: did you guys go to any of the Navy bases?
No, we couldn't. Actually, वो एक रह गया है. Maybe for the next version of the book, we would love to go. We met a few Navy. We have only one Navy story. I think.
Yes, and I love that story, the submarine one. How the life of a Navy guy when they go into one of their patrols. How in their team, the first 10 days, everyone puts on 5 kgs because they're all like so well fed. And then supplies run out and then they just have khichdi. You know, the whole way you build the whole story and even the specifics of the entire, how does a submarine work? You know, the diesel electric submarine, the whole thing, you've explained it really, really well in the book. So that's why I was asking, did you get a chance to go to one of these places?
Commander Bhargav promised that he'll take us to one of these places. So I just have to, follow up with him. He's based in Hyderabad now, so we keep meeting on and on. And the fascinating thing is, Repi, all these folks, they're very. I mean, what they've done is amazing, right? If you look at what they've done, and all of these are real events, what they've achieved is amazing. But when you talk to them, they are very down to earth, right? I mean, they opened up completely, and they also, if the stories also bring out their own self-doubt. I mean, Bhargav self-doubt, saying, wondering whether he's doing the right thing or not, and all that. So they also made themselves very vulnerable.
Yeah.
But they're very, very down to earth people. Even today, when I go to Delhi, I meet Pillai sir, and it's quite a character. Like he's one of my favorite.
Pillai sir is a legend, right? He took a bullet, and then when you go, like, he makes jokes. Like, he'll order soya chap for me, like vegetarian guy's chicken.
Kya baat hai. Or his story is also really nice. He's the one who has that plaque formed for him, or in the village, right?
Two little children in Manipur, and it is still their lives. You should see videos of these children. They've grown up now. They're beautiful, both of them. And had Colonel Pillai not done what he did, these two children would have died. And and
they're just literally putting their life in before your life. It's literally that story.
Yeah. So that's unlimited liability, and that was Colonel Pillai's unlimited liability. Today also I go meet him. He's solid fun. As long as the joke's not on you, it's okay. If the joke's on you, you're gone.
Somehow all of them have a good sense of humor, I feel.
See, fundamentally, if you think about it, soldier is a very emotional person. Right? Because you cannot do what they do. Obviously, training and all that is, but in that crunch moment, you cannot do what they do if they're not emotionally encouraged to do that. And then more often than not, I've realized that they use humor as a way to couch their emotions. Right? So that's why you'll see that a lot of armed forces people have a very heightened and almost black humor, morbid humor, right? So, and they have also this very blasé approach. They're like, nahi yaar, chalta hai na yaar, wo ye. I mean, they're not blasé, dude. I mean, I've seen them in action, but they have that whole ki chalta hai. They're like Rohit Sharma. The way Rohit comes across, but when he's on the pitch, right, he's not blasé. Nothing that he does is blasé or sort of chill.
Yeah.
But he comes across as a chill.
Yeah. My God. So it's like army वाले air force वाले की लेते हैं, navy वाले भी air force वाले की लेते हैं. There was this navy, in the same navy story where we say that how they were making fun of how the air force were taking a siesta after their lunch. So air force वाले are like,
या तो लेते हैं या सबकी उनसे जलती है.
One of the two. One of the two. Lovely. So in all these stories, there are ones that you haven't written in the book as well, because you said you've met so many folks through all your research. What is this one story that really stayed with you but didn't make a cut, or which might make a cut to the second book?
So there are a couple that come to mind. The one I want to talk about is we didn't have enough time to fashion this story, in the sense that we heard it, but we didn't have enough time to do enough sittings. But there was this lady Air Force officer who directed, remember after the Balakot attack happened, the next day there was a attack by the Pakistani fighter aircraft on us, right? And there was this lady who directed our response. We felt that her story would have been fascinating, because that would be the only female story in the book. We unfortunately were not able to carry it. Yep. So I think that is one story that we absolutely would want to figure it out and carry. The other story that we've really worked very hard to get access to, what we are not able to, is this amazing story about the army doctors. The Army Medical Corps, the doctors in the army do an amazing job and don't always get the recognition that they deserve. But specifically, there's this hospital in Srinagar. It's called the 92nd Base Hospital. And the motto or the saying about that hospital is, if a person comes in breathing, we'll save him, right? And the doctors there are magicians. And imagine, like, all of these battle casualties, the toughest ones will end up at the 92nd Base Hospital. And it's amazing the magic that they do, wherein they just say that सांसें चलती होनी चाहिए. right? अगर सांसें चल रही है तो हम बचा लेंगे.
बचा लेंगे. Wow.
So I
I
think
think
the next book.
everything about armed forces is like wow. And make, I mean, lack of better words, like wow, amazing, too good, outstanding, it chalega. Pura, what about for you?
I think 92nd base wala for sure. There was one more story around which Sudeep showed me a video, but we couldn't get much information. Was around the story of this Havaldar called as Badlu Ram. This is a Havaldar who had passed away, and they celebrate him. But that is the one which I wish we could have covered, or we'll cover in future.
So part 2 of the book is coming, lag raha hai mujhe, nahi?
Hopefully.
Yes.
It requires a lot of effort because we prefer going and sitting face to face with these people because that's when the emotions come through, wherever possible, or have extended conversations with them. And the way we've written these is we ask them to narrate, but then we write it. We write it in our own voice. So it's a lot of effort to do the research. So we just we want to, but we don't know when we'll get the time to. But there's so many. I mean, we can.
Yeah, you guys have so
20
many more stories, man. Definitely something should come out.
Yeah.
Really, so many stories from so many more locations.
No, I think the only thing I'll say is a lot of the places that we've gone to, we've obviously gotten special access because of the people we were engaged with. But a lot of us as citizens of this country also have access to these places, right? And they're amazing places to go to. There, can be an adventure trek and stuff like that. So I would recommend that go, because when you go to these places, I think you will also appreciate what these men and women are serving to protect, right? And whether you are all of us are patriotic, right? There's no two ways about it.
Yes.
Whether we believe it or not, we don't believe it or not, like when we're writing the book, we said, look, some of you will take inspiration, some of you will just love the stories, right? Because they're written in such a way that you might want to take a lesson from it, or you might just want to read it for entertainment. And we would say just go to these places, right? Even if it's like a trek, forget the fact that these things don't call out to you as much, but they're amazing places to go visit. Go to Uri, go to Pune, get the opportunity to go to NDA. I mean, there's amazing architecture in terms of the buildings. So the environment is very different. Very rarely do you see clean roads and traffic rules being followed. You see that in the cantonments.
Yes. Even in regular cities, when you go to the cantonment side of the city, it's a different feel. The number of trees, the roads are so broad. They are always at that point so well paved, and very interesting trespassers shall be shot at kind of sites as well. So always cantonments have that feels. Okay, I wanted to ask this last question as a part of, just to wrap up. You guys have done a lot of research for your book as well. So are there any books or podcasts or videos that come to your mind as part of your research that you would like to recommend to our listeners and recommend to me as well?
Yeah, so there are many podcasts. There's a retired Major General. His name is General Moore, Yash Moore, YASHMOR. He ran an entire series during the Kargil War anniversary, and he spoke to a lot of people who served in Kargil at that time and as officers, and spoke to them, and it was fascinating. Like when you get a first-person account of what happened in Kargil, it is amazing to hear his story. Beer Biceps, Ranveer Alavadia, he had a series of armed forces people as part of his show. He has a lot of para special forces officers as part of his show. I think some of those episodes are fascinating. Amazing to read that. And the bunch of books that we've read, I think Purav will cover most of them, but they're amazing books written by serving officers, ex-officers on their journeys. And I think some of them are written extremely well. They're written as stories. I think a couple that Purav will talk about, General Cardozo's books, are the ones that come to mind. I mean, I would strongly recommend people read those books.
Wow, I'll link this up definitely in our show notes. Tell me, Purav, what about your favorites?
I think Major General Ian Cardozo's books are fascinating. Also, this very popular series called as India's Most Fearless. They cover some of these stories really well. I loved reading them. Recently, Major General KJS Tilma published his autobiography called as Kitne Ghazi Aaye, Kitne Ghazi Gaye. If you were to read one book, I would strongly recommend reading Kitne Ghazi Aaye, Kitne Ghazi Gaye. He talks about his time in Kashmir and the entire set of operations that he successfully led there. Also, some international.
से दिलों सर तुम्हारी बजाएंगे वो is Lieutenant General, not Major General.
Yaar, Purav, this is not going to leave you.
have it. एक रैंक कम करके बताओ.
Also, some international books were very nice. Jocko Willing is a retired Navy SEAL. Uski books are quite well written, where he talks about both his different tours of duties as well as how to take leadership lessons out of them. So he's again one another author I would recommend you can look at. Uske baad to there is like endless literature. There are so many books being written, but unfortunately not as popularized amongst the reader culture. So, but you'll be amazed if you look at any topic or any particular war and search a little bit. There will be tons of very well written books. There's so much literature available on this subject.
Wow.
So in terms of movies and TV shows, Band of Brothers is the one I'll highly recommend. It's about this one company called the Easy Company during the Second World War and led by an amazing officer and what they achieved during that Second World War. You know, so strongly recommend that. There's a series on Prime called SEAL Team, which is, you know, very recent. So there's, I think, 7 seasons of SEAL Team. I thought it was very extremely well made. You know, Hindi movies, you know, strongly recommend Sher Shah and Lakshya. I thought Sher Shah, they did a really good job. I mean, obviously they over dramatized it as you would expect, but I think what I really appreciated is every character who they showed in the movie, in the credits later on, they showed a picture of that character as he today, right?
Yes.
And a bit of backstory on what that character is doing today. And I thought that was a lovely touch for
very
them
emotional
to do
as
that.
well. Yeah.
Very emotional, very well researched. I mean, there's this scene of an artillery shell, and they say that if you hear the whine of an artillery shell, that means it has passed you by. So if you hear the whine, that means you're still alive. And they show that they show the whine and an explosion next to, you know, small things like that. I thought they did a really good job of making it as authentically as possible.
Very, very cool. It's a good movie. Amazing,
and you know,
amazing.
The thing is, Captain Vikram Batra was this larger than life personality. I've spoken to a lot of officers who served with him, and I thought the makers did a great job of bringing that personality to life. And Siddharth Malhotra did an amazing job in bringing that larger than life personality that Captain Batra had. You know,
I think for those who haven't watched, Sam Bahadur also was a very well-made movie. I think one of the things around that to appreciate, as we did the research for this book, is there are wars, there are these specific instances. But apart from that, armed forces people have regular lives, they have their promotions, they have their families. And all these things are going on in the background. And then you have to step up when the occasion is there, right? So I think that piece I feel was well portrayed within Sam Bahadur, where you go through his entire life, everything is happening in his life, and in parallel, when the war is there, he successfully manages the entire war.
Yeah, it's like how you initially mentioned about, you know, them having pension and all of that, and then you realize that it's a salary, it's wages, it's how they have to maintain their life. Even all those things are so important, which many of us don't. We don't think of those things with respect to armed forces and all. We just think ladai kar rahe hain. That's all they do all the time. ऐसे नहीं होता है. So many of them. I remember in our initial conversation when I said, a civilian like me would think that, you know, if I was in the armed forces, that war nahi aaya in my entire lifetime, I'm lucky. I don't have to go through hardships. I don't have to go through the idea of life versus death and all that. Whereas you guys said that no, that's not the case. They would think that it's unfortunate that they did not get a chance to actually be in the war front and serving the country or
mentality is they don't want war. No one wants war, right? Because they know the price that. But I mean, if we have to fight a war, it's an honor because that's what we are trained to do.
Ask
One
me
of these
one
officers
question.
तो ऑफिस में क्यों जाता है? तो ये पैसे मिलते हैं ना, तो मुझे भी पैसे मिलते हैं ये सब करने.
We asked this one question for the Air Force officer for Balakot, like, how did you train for this mission? He's like, I've been training for this for 15 years. Like, I had flown this mission so many times before, right? So aisa, we train for this, we prepare for this. We wish that we don't have to do it. But if the opportunity arises, I would want me doing it as opposed to one of my colleagues doing it.
Yeah. Very true. All right. You guys have shared all the stories that I actually read, and now you guys spoke so much about all of it so vividly that, for example, bunker, where I don't think I'm going to ever enter, I know how it looks like, or the simulator and things like that. It was very, very nice. I had a great time podcasting with you too. I hope you guys had fun too.
We did. Thanks for having us, Reti. It was. We had a great time reliving some of those stories and laughing with you. I think it was solid fun.
Absolutely, it was a pleasure. We can talk about these stories like all day. So it was a pleasure talking through this.
I know. You mean I can do another episode of just talking about all these stories, man. Say about it, chat.
Okay. All right.
Thank you so much. Have a wonderful day. Thank you. Thanks a lot again. See you.
Bye.
Bye. Wow. That was a fantastic conversation. Well, a note to our listeners. If you guys want to follow Purav and Sudeep on LinkedIn or connect with them, Dr. Purav Gandhi and Sudeep Krishna, we will link both their LinkedIn profiles. And I'll add a link to their book, Lead from the Front, in our show notes as well. Also, you'll be happy to know that we have now started a new service of curating travel itineraries to destinations made just for you. So if you want to get a vacation planned, leave us a note on Instagram or DM us on our Substack page and we will plan something special for you. As always, we have put up several of the photographs that Purav and Sudeep shared with us on our Substack page and on Instagram as well. We are called Misadventures of a Sneaker. Also, if you enjoyed listening to this episode, would you like to support our team by buying us a coffee? If yes, you could head on over to our show notes and click on support to contribute any amount you'd like. It'll be a huge morale booster for us. See you in the next episode. Bye-bye.